Hello, and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. Today, we are discussing a skilled Lyran unit who has a few odd historical moments. They have been around since the dawn of the Lyran Commonwealth. They are called the Ever-Sworded Third, and they joined in Operation Audacity. They are the 3rd Lyran Guards. The Brigade emblem of the Lyran Guards is a smoky-looking, stylized white horse's head on a shield. It is placed on the left leg of their mechs and on the left side of their vehicles. The regimental emblem is a pair of crossed broadswords. It appears on the right leg of their mechs and the right side of their vehicles, and represents their nickname of the Ever-Sworded Third. The color scheme of the Lyran Guard Brigade is blue with a large white stripe down the right side of the mech, with the torso, arm, and leg having part of the stripe. The vehicles and aircraft have the same color scheme, but the stripe on the right side sometimes covers the entirety of that side. The 3rd Lyran Guards have been around since the beginning of the Lyran Commonwealth. To skip spoilers, go to the time listed. The Lyran Guards were the 2nd Brigade built up for the Lyran Commonwealth. They were developed in 2341 after the addition of the Arcturan Guards. The Brigade would take their troops from all over the Lyran Commonwealth, unlike the Arcturan Guards. The Lyran Guards would be involved in every battle the Lyrans would face during the pre-Star League era. The 3rd would be formed early on, and, like other members of the Brigade, their loyalty was to the Commonwealth as a nation rather than to the ruling class or the rich. This meant they had to keep the nobles in check when things got out of hand. With the general peace that came with the beginning of the Star League, the Lyran Guards would be kept off of the front lines and remain on the border during the various wars of this era. The Lyran Guards would grow so large that they had to add division commands that oversaw between 4 and 10 regiments. The 3rd Lyran Guards were part of the 1st Division. In the 2760s, the 3rd tried to help broker good relations with Canopus by trying to get close to the staff of a Canopian pleasure circus. This did not go over well with LCAF command. As a result, the 3rd would get transferred to Orkney in 2765. A special medical team was also assigned to that garrison due to the unit spending too much time at the pleasure circus. By 2786, the Lyran Guards would be made up of 35 regiments, including 2 that were made up of former SLDF soldiers. The 3rd would still be stationed on Orkney at the beginning of the war. They would be shipped out to fight when needed, including holding off a Combine attack on Alexandria. During the war, Colonel Mackenzie Weber would come across a broadsword on Alexandria in the ruins of a museum. He kept it and made it a rule that every officer of the 3rd must wear a broadsword on their hip. This would lead to the unit's nickname of the Ever-Sworded Third. They would be part of the team that took Sulafat near the end of the war. They drove off the 5th Arcab Legion, which would eventually lead to the destruction of that unit. The 3rd would remain stationed on Sulafat as the war came to an end. At that time, they would be down to 45% effective strength. As the war broke out, the 3rd Lyran Guards would be up to 113% effective strength and still stationed on Sulafat. They would still be a medium-weight unit and would hold the world against the Combine. In 2844, the 3rd would finally get involved in a political conflict. The wife of Archon, Marcus Steiner, would take the throne in December after his death. This led to Claudius Steiner, brother of the deceased Archon, gathering loyal forces and attacking Tharkod in 2845. The 3rd Lyran Guards failed in their defense, and Claudius Steiner took the throne, then executed his sister-in-law to ensure his status was secure. After the death of coordinator Yaguchi Kurita by his concubine, who was a Lyran spy in disguise, a plan of revenge was launched. The last remaining warships of the DCMS laid siege to Hesperus II. They held the space around the world for 5 months, not allowing any Lyran ship to enter or escape that system. The Lyran counterattack began in late 2853. The LCAF would send a large fleet led by their last warship, the LCS Invincible. It required great sacrifice, but they would break the siege, and several units would make it to the world in order to fight the Combine invaders. This included the 3rd Lyran Guards. When the last Kurita warship was destroyed, they would abandon the siege, and their forces on the world would pull out after fierce fighting. By the end of the war, the 3rd was down to 63% effective and stationed on Hesperus 2, protecting the world as they rebuilt the damaged factories. At this point, they would become a heavyweight unit. The 3rd would not remain on Hesperus for very long, as they would not be involved in the later battles. They would continue to guard the Commonwealth, but were not involved in any notable conflicts. The 3rd would be stationed on Tharkad as of 3025, as defenders of the royal house. They would remain at their garrison until the beginning of the 4th Succession War. The Lyran offensive would begin with a major assault on the Draconis Combine called Operation Götterdamerung. The 3rd would be sent to capture the world of Vega. The 2nd and 14th Legion of Vega couldn't compete with the elite Lyran unit. A few months later, in October, Theodore Kurita would arrive to rally the legions of Vega. The counterattack would divide the Guards' forces. Beta Company of the 2nd Battalion played defense, as the 3rd Guards had to flee the world. The commander of the 3rd would demand a return to Vega, but was denied. Instead, the 3rd would join in on the final wave of the operation by attacking New Wessex. Due to damage taken during the previous battle, the 3rd was not up to the task of capturing the world. They would return to Lyran territory in order to recover after the war. While the Lyran Commonwealth was against it, the establishment of the Free Rosselhog Republic would happen in 3034. However, a rogue group of Draconis Combine soldiers would rebel against the new nation. The 3rd Lyran Guards were sent as a token force to assist the Rosselhog troops in defending Candace. The battle began with a standoff that turned into the slaughter of civilians. The 3rd would get beaten to the punch as Theodore Kurita sent in the Shin Legion to solve the problem. The Shin Legion was able to defeat the enemy mercenaries and quell the rebels. This made it a wasted trip for the 3rd. Once again, they would return to Tharkad to prepare for the next war. Just before the war started, the 3rd Lyran Guards would be transferred to Baxter as a jump-off point for the invasion of the Draconis Combine. The 3rd would be given the opportunity to redeem themselves by attacking Vega once again. They would invade alongside the 3rd Davian Guards, Snord's Irregulars, the 1st Gravewalkers, and the 17th Recon Regiment, better known as Camacho's Caballeros. They would face off with the 14th Legion of Vega and the 5th Amphibian Light Assault Group. The mercenary forces landed first and battled the 5th Amphibian, while the FedCom troops would attempt to surprise the 14th Legion. The skill of the mercenary team would drive the 5th off the world. The 2 FedCom regiments held the 14th in place until the mercenaries were finished with the 5th. The 14th Legion had to face 2 fronts, but held strong for 6 weeks. By the end of the fighting, they would have to abandon the world. The FedCom forces would set up a base on the world. Meanwhile, the 3rd Lyran Guards would go to Port Mosby for rest and repair to prepare them for an assault of Buckminster in the 3rd wave of the campaign. However, the Vega garrison would get hit by a terrorist bombing, which was followed by a DCMS counterattack. The Lyran forces would have to evacuate, and the world would return to the Draconis Combine. The war would slow down as the year came towards its end. There'd be no 3rd wave of the campaign due to the Combine counterattack and other political reasons. Despite being ready to fight, the 3rd Lyran Guards would not be able to head out a second time during the war. By 3040, they would be garrisoning Gonsing alongside the 1st FedCom RCT. Also, during this time period, they would become an RCT, like many of the other units of the AFFC. In 3044, the Federated Commonwealth would launch Operation Balder. The 3rd Lyran Guards would team up with the 11th Donegal Guards to take back the world of Alfeka, a world that had been taken during the 4th Succession War. They would face off with the 12th Sunzang Academy cadre and easily overwhelm and defeat them. This was the only known major victory in the campaign. However, the campaign would continue with border raids until 3049. As the era began, the 3rd would be on Cimarron. With the arrival of the clans, the 3rd Lyran Guards would be stationed on Graceland alongside the 11th Donegal Guards. They would work well together to keep the world out of clanner hands. They would remain at this garrison for the remainder of this era. Before the FedCom Civil War started, the 3rd Lyran Guards would receive several Fafnir battle mechs to assist in fighting Clan Jade Falcon. However, when the war broke out in December 3062, the 11th Donegal Guards would want to get rid of the ComGuard 388th Division, who was part of the defense of the Jade Falcon occupied zone border. The 3rd would try to calm down their longtime partners from causing bigger problems. However, local riots would make the peacekeeping efforts of the 3rd Lyran Guards more difficult. The 11th would demand the ComGuard forces disarm. This would lead into a fight that caused more riots and terrorist attacks across Graceland. The 3rd would intervene in order to contain the 388th and try to calm down the 11th. The fighting would lead to a communications interdiction, but eventually the peace efforts of the 3rd would allow the 388th to leave the world and the leader of the 11th Donegal Guards to be replaced with a loyalist officer from the 3rd Lyran Guards. As for the 11th's commander, he would be technically promoted into military command. In February 3063, the 3rd would get transferred to Pandora. They would guard the world from border raids by the Jade Falcons. The Falcons would finally strike in 3064, when the 3rd were rotated to another border world. Not long after that, the 3rd Lyran Guards would join General Adam Steiner and other pro-Catherine forces in Operation Audacity. They would get involved in the recapture of Grouse. They would face only 2 trinaries and 1 binary of the 10th Provisional Garrison Cluster. The battle would last 2 days. The Guards would be used as a defensive team during the majority of the operation, holding worlds taken away from the Jade Falcons. By the end of the war, they would be stationed on Cremond. Their efforts holding the border and fighting the Falcons would keep them out of the Civil War, despite being a loyalist regiment. When the dust cleared, they were at 75% effective strength, and about 80% of their gear was of advanced quality. In February 3068, the Jade Falcons would invade Cremond. The 7th Falcon Regulars would face off with the 3rd Lyran Guards, who were experienced at facing clan raids. The 3rd pulled back as the 7th attacked, then drew the 7th Falcon Regulars into a trap, where they would be surrounded by the Lyran Guards. It cost the Falcons greatly to break away from the trap and leave the world. The 3rd would trade the Falcon salvage for other equipment and more troops. The Lyran capital of Tharkad would get seized by the Word of Blake just after the FedCom Civil War came to an end. The blockade of the world kept the LCAF at bay, and several liberation attempts would fail. General Adam Steiner would gather a force to liberate the world in late 3071. This would incorporate several Lyran units alongside a team of mercenaries and clanners, which included elements of the Wolf's Dragoons, Kellhounds, Gravewalkers, Clan Wolf in Exile, and 1 Jade Falcon Nova from the Turkina Keshik. In January 3072, a large naval battle let the massive army begin the liberation of the capital. The 3rd Lyran Guards would be the first to land on Tharkad using an assault drop. Upon landing, they would hold the LZ for the remainder of the liberation team. This included the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Royal Guards, 24th Lyran Guards, 11th and 20th Arcturan Guards, alongside the mercenary team and clan forces. The 3rd and the Falcon Nova would draw the attention of the Blake forces due to their aggressive tactics. This would make them a very formidable team. The 3rd Lyran Guards would push the 37th Militia Division into the waiting weapons of the 13th Wolf Guards, devastating the Blakist forces. The efforts of the massive Liberation Army would destroy the majority of the Blake forces on the world, with less than 2 level 3 formations escaping the world. After Tharkod was liberated, the 3rd would fully join Stone's coalition, as would the Jade Falcon Nova they had fought with. The 3rd Lyran Guards would be part of Group 4 of the Free Worlds League Task Force. The team would go to Talitha in May 3077. They worked with the Beta Galaxy of Clan Wolf in Exile and the Marlet Crucis March Militia. The team took air superiority quickly due to the help of a Nova Cat warship. Then the team would overwhelm the Blakist defenders and liberate the world. Group 4 would hold the world. Then, in October, the Clan Wolf in Exile Beta Galaxy would head out to Kara in order to take back that world. However, they faced significantly greater numbers than they had expected, in addition to the use of atomic and chemical weapons. Beta Galaxy returned to Talitha in order to recover and await reinforcements. It seems likely that all of Group 4 joined in on the final attack on Kara for revenge. The fighting on Kara was brutal, but the use of orbital bombardment and greater numbers allowed the coalition forces to take the world. The campaign across the Free Worlds League took a heavy toll on Group 4. By the time they joined up with the rest of the Free Worlds Liberation Forces on Pollux in June of 78, the team would be down to 1/3 of their original strength. The Liberation Forces took time to repair and refit before the assault on Terra. The 3rd would work with the 17th Benjamin Regulars to liberate the Pacific Northwest in the North American campaign. With Terra liberated, the 3rd would return to the Lyran Alliance and garrison the worlds of Solaris and Rain. They would avoid the chaos of Solaris City and mostly patrolled the less populated regions of the world. As the war ended, they would be up to 75% effective strength, with 90% of their gear being of advanced quality. In the early part of this era, the 3rd Lyran Guards would be transferred back to Port Moresby at 80% effective strength by 3085. This was done to keep the recovering unit out of any potential conflict. By 3132, the 3rd would receive newly developed Zeus X battle mechs and face off with the 2nd Legion of Vega, who had new Dragon 2 mechs. The 3rd would win and keep their world safe. The 3rd would be ordered to abandon the Jade Falcon border territory as a new invasion began in 3142. The 3rd would stubbornly remain and hold their garrison on Melissia. The 3rd Lyran Guards would take heavy damage and would have to pull away. They would go to Chapultepec, which would also get invaded, leading to yet another retreat to the world of Quang Chao Wang. At this point, the Falcon war machine would slow down. This gave the 3rd a chance to recover from the heavy damage they had sustained. The 3rd would get transferred to Hesperus by 3144 as part of the defense of the world as the Jade Falcons attacked in January 3145. The Lyran forces would pull out as the Falcons arrived, only putting up a token defense. The LCAF would leave a garrison of mercenaries to buy time for a Clan Wolf counterattack. This cost the lives of many mercenaries, including the majority of the Iridani Light Horse. After that, the 3rd Lyran Guards would be back on garrison duty on Adelaide and Mahone. They would be reduced to 70% effective strength, but would have high-level gear due to receiving new equipment from the factories on Loxley and Coventry. During this time, they would raid Melissia as a revenge strike. The raid would be successful, and they would take a good amount of supplies from the Jade Falcons. They would continue to build up their strength as the Ill-Clan era began. The Ever-Sorted 3rd are one of the standout units of their brigade. They have a great battle record, high-level equipment, and choose to not fight their brothers in the Civil War. They stayed strong over the centuries, and as we enter the Ill-Clan era, they will probably have more victories to their name, an exemplifier for how the Lyran Guards should function. Due to their wild history, the 3rd Lyran Guards have many notable pilots. Here are a few of them. Mackenzie Weber, the commander of the 3rd during the First Succession War. He is noted for starting the tradition where the officers of the 3rd had a broadsword to their dress uniform. This was due to him finding a broadsword in the ruins of a museum on Alexandria. This also gave the unit their nickname of the Ever-Sorted 3rd. Patrick Finian, He became the commander of the 3rd just before the 4th Succession War. He would remain with the unit until the end of the War of 39. He would get promoted to Nandi Steiner's LCAF command staff and would end up working as part of the FedCom Brigade in the 3050s. Paul Zardetto. His efforts during the evacuation of Kessel during the War of 39 would earn him prestige for his heroism. This would lead to a promotion where he would become the commander of the 3rd. He would lead the team through the clan invasion, and during the FedCom Civil War, he tried to keep the peace between the 388th Division and the 11th Donegal Guards. He was also a key leader of the Free World's Liberation Team during the Ward of Blake War. He is best known for piloting a Warhammer 2C Type 3. Roger Hall. He was the late Dark Age commander of the 3rd. He would help them survive the onslaught of Clan Jade Falcon and help get some revenge later on Melissia. He put great efforts into rebuilding his forces to make them as strong as possible in order to handle the threats of the late Dark Age and Ill Clan era. Victor Doth. He was part of the attack on Vega during the 4th Succession War, and lost his assault mech in the retreat. He was given a commando, and was not happy with the lighter mech. Thus, he would battle heavier mechs in order to get one for himself. He would be part of the attack on Vega in the War of 39, but he would die during the heavy fighting, and never get his new heavy mech. He originally piloted a Banshee, and later a Commando. Yoshi Daedalus Ems. A pilot during the FedCom Civil War, he was very protective of his squad mates due to having lost his only child years earlier. Thus, he received his Greek tragedy-inspired nickname. He was a skilled warrior and even fought well against Clan Jade Falcon. He piloted a GRF 1DS Griffin. The 3rd Lyran Guards usually have higher-end technology. Due to their good battle record, they have a variety of Draconis Combine and Clanner mechs gathered by salvage. However, many of the mechs they salvaged ended up going to military command for research purposes. Despite that, they would primarily use top-of-the-line Lyran equipment. As their name implies, they are trained in defensive tactics. Later on, they would become a very aggressive unit, yet they would still have good teamwork skills. They would become a bigger threat on the battlefield once they had trained in combat drop strategies, allowing them to take territory and then hold it for their allies. A good mix of offense and defense. Originally, they were a medium-weight regiment, but by the end of the 2nd Succession War, they would become heavyweight. During the early eras, they would be made up of a regiment of mechs with some armor and infantry support. Around 3039, they would be upgraded to an RCT, and they would keep that formation into the Dark Age. This formation includes a regiment of mechs, 2 wings of arrow fighters, 3 regiments of armor, 5 regiments of infantry, including jump infantry, and later battle armor. This makes them a very powerful unit to face on the battlefield. They would have enough dropships for any operation, and they would be provided the necessary jump ships by military command. They would take recruits from across the Commonwealth, and even bring in former Comstar soldiers, good tactics, good equipment. The 3rd Lyran Guards are one of the best in their brigade. There is no fiction I could find that was focused on the 3rd Lyran Guards, but some of their fights are mentioned in Operation Audacity, Part 3 of the Archer Christofori trilogy. Beyond that, there is plenty of information in sourcebooks about the 3rd Lyran Guards, including a handful of TRO entries. Bear in mind that some of the sourcebooks only have TO&E data. The 3rd Lyran Guards have been a unit I've been wanting to cover ever since I saw an entry about them in Historical Rush Wars. I was curious why they were the only Lyran unit involved in the Ronin War. Thus, I did some research, and after that, I added them to my list. I'm glad I did, as they are pretty cool, and it is fun digging into some of the deeper parts of Lyran Commonwealth history. I highly recommend painting up a set of Lyran Guards. Whether you frame them as the 3rd or any of the other regiments, you cannot go wrong. The Guards have a simple paint scheme, which stands out on the battlefield and provides for some creativity. They also have plenty of history for reenactments. However, they also work perfectly for non-canon skirmishes, as they are a fairly powerful unit with a distinctive look. If you have painted up a set, let me know in the comments. Next time, I will be discussing Simonson's Cutthroats. Wait, they're McGee's again? Whatever. After that, I am going to the Capellan Confederation to discuss the Death Commandos. Just in time for Christmas. Thank you for watching. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. I have over 55 different episodes of this series. I have even made a playlist for those of you who need more BattleTech action. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the tavern.